Chair Mirda Meyer.
Here.
Vice Chair Paul Mayer.
Here.
Andy McConnell.
Here.
Susan Claus.
Here.
Andy Jensen. Not here yet. Amy Kutsky, also not here.
Amy is expected.
There we go.
There you go.
Amy is expected to arrive a little bit later. Kurt Studer.
Here.
Mayor Clark.
Here.
Council President Harris.
She is here, just stepped out for just a second.
Councilor Young.
Here.
Councilor Garland.
Here.
Councilor King is absent. He's unable to make it. Councilor Kuiper.
Here.
Councilor Robinson is expected to join us later. Do we have a quorum? We do have this.
You have 10. Okay. At this time, I will now open the budget committee meeting to public comment on the 2017-18 City of Sherwood budget. If you wish to speak, please fill out one of the testimony forms and submit them to the Finance Administrative Assistant. I will recognize those persons wishing to speak, and any questions should be addressed through me. When you come to the microphone, please state your name and city of residence for the record, as this hearing will be recorded. Please speak clearly into the microphone. Please limit your testimony to 4 minutes. Has any, okay, we have no applications for public testimony. Is there anyone here that would like to submit testimony? Okay. We will move right into new business.
And before we start, just so you, whoa, those are loud. Just so you all know, some of you know that I have some health issues, multiple sclerosis. I'm feeling a relapse coming on. So I apologize if I have any slurred speech this evening or if I have any muscle spasms. If I get real bad, we'll have to take a quick recess. I think I'll be okay, but I just wanted to give you a heads up so nobody's worried that I'm not having seizures or anything if something looks a little weird on my side. So just a heads up.
One of the reasons the lights are down a little lower. Bright fluorescence can trigger an attack for Kate.
I like them lower. I think that's great. It's more homey.
Do you want to start? You want me to start? Let me start. Welcome back, everyone. So tonight is probably going to be labeled Public Works Night. We delayed talking about the Public Works General Fund budget last week. Craig was not able to make it. And then all of the enterprise funds are largely operated and managed by Craig. There is overlap with Julia in community development as well, because of the engineering that goes on in her department that helped to support a lot of projects in public works. But tonight is primarily going to be Craig's night to answer questions that you might have about those funds. I also want to stress that we were talking today, usually when we get to the enterprise funds, the budget committee is kind of tired after looking at all the general fund dollars, and we focus so much on the general fund. But in reality, when you look at the total city budget, which is approximately $26 million, the general fund is about $12 million. So the other $14 million is all the enterprise funds and things like that. So it's more than half our total budget, and sometimes we run through it because it's the third or fourth night and we want to just get it done. So I think we have the time tonight. We've scheduled a fourth meeting next week. Staff believes that we're probably not going to be making decisions tonight as a budget committee, that those decisions ultimately will be next week. It gives you a whole week to kind of think about things. It's a holiday weekend and things like that. We want to get through all the presentation stuff tonight and just come back next week and deliberate on the various budget items. So with that intro, go ahead.
And just another topic about how we're going to go about it. So the general fund departments that are public works, we'll look at just as we have been, page by page, and we'll look at the street operations fund. But I'm going to ask that we look at operating funds differently than we look at capital funds. And the reason for that is that capital funds, really we budget at the project level, and there's a lot of intricate details that go into how we come up with the total budget involving a few minutes of a person's time on this project, and we might need a professional service, or we might need a lawyer, or we might need materials, and a lot of things you don't know for sure until the bid comes in, exactly how those will be split. And so taking it line by line is really not very telling. Whereas looking at the overall CIP budget, looking at the projects that we have, making sure everybody understands where the projects are and what we're working on. And then if there are specific questions on the capital funds, we can definitely look at those. But going through line by line on the capital funds isn't very productive and doesn't give the true vision of what the capital funds are for. So that will be at the end, and Julia will come up and join us, and we'll go over the CIP and capital funds all at once. So when we're going through the detail, if we skip over pages, that's the reason, is because we'll be coming back to them all at once as capital funds.
Okay, let's dive in to, I think we wanted to start on page 36, is that correct?
That's correct.
With fleet. So this department, correct me if I'm wrong, Katie, is still within, is it still within general fund?
General fund. Mhm.
Okay.
Welcome, Craig.
And before Craig gets into any detail on the expense side, if you'll look at the revenue side and you'll see transfers in, and you see a little bit of bouncing around in that revenue line. And that has to do with something that we discussed about how we're allocating overhead and how we're looking at the very detail in the administrative overhead, the engineering overhead. Well, the third piece is the fleet. And so we're looking in detail at how are we allocating those costs to the individual departments. And in the past, we've done an estimate of how much we would spend and then just decided how much it would be and transfer it in. So we're in the process of truing this up, how much has actually been spent. We took year-to-date with actual invoices spent, reallocating costs, and then checking all the formulas in them. And so you'll see that they've actually gone down just a little bit. There was some errors in some formulas that I found, and just some tweaking of them that needed to happen to get things okay from an audit standpoint for those transfers. So that's where those changes come. And I will say that there may be a mid-year adjustment to those that has to happen once we get into the very detail of how the transfer is happening, if it's not equitable. But it's going to take a significant amount of work on the part of finance to make sure that those transfers are in actuality for the actual work being done. And we just started on the project of doing that.
Thank you.
So Craig, can you talk about two things that we always get kind of a question? Your personnel services budget increased in the proposed budget, and there's a reason for that.
Right. So the increase in the personal service is due to, we've expanded Woodhaven Park, that we're gonna have to maintain at a higher level than what we were maintaining in the field. So we're taking our current mechanics position and adding 8 hours to shop time that we're behind in, that actually can get the work done and get our equipment out the door so the guys can use it in the field. And then the other 8 hours is going towards the parks. It's a split half and half. So from the part-time position, part of the position adding to it's going in fleet, and the other side will be going into parks. So you don't have to actually add a part-time person or another staff person to maintain Woodhaven Park. So that's really the increase.
So your FTEs are how much there?
So for total public works, and this is the three departments, fleet and parks and facilities, there are 13.01 FTEs. For the one that we're looking at right now, which is fleet, it's 1.87.
The total was 13 point what?
13.01 is how much Public Works has allocated in the general fund for 17-18.
And Craig, the cost of fuel and oil has significantly increased, I'm guessing, just based on rates and usage.
Yeah, we don't pay taxes on our fuel and oil here, but we at one time here, when the prices went up a year and a half from when we do our budget, it went up to close to $3.75 or so that we were paying. So we try to put a little money in there, and if we don't spend it, it's there.
Yeah.
So I expect that to continue to go up.
Does anyone have any other questions of Craig regarding fleet?
So I had a question. On the 6032, the health, vision, dental, it went from 900 to 15,000.
So we had an individual who had not selected to have health coverage in the past year. And then each year at open enrollment, they do have the option of adding the family in or making any changes that they need to make. And so we did have an individual who made a change in there.
So one ad
Health
made it
insurance.
from 900 to
Yes,
15,000.
it did.
Significant, yes.
Okay,
Health insurance ain't cheap.
okay.
The other thing you might want to get a little bit more, you always ask about buying new vehicles on line 7040. There is $134,000 in the next year's proposed budget for vehicles. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so in next year's budget, we have a replacement of a 2004 Trailblazer as well as a 2011 Charger. One of them has about 105,000 and the other one currently has 87, so by the end of the year, they put about 25,000 miles a year on them. They'll be over the 100,000 mark. We try to keep our police cars 7 years or 100,000 miles is when we usually try to get a little bit of money out of them before we have to put a bunch of money into them. They drive the cars differently than you drive your own personal car. Not that it's bad or good, but that's why most places go 5 years, 100,000, and we try to get 7 years out of that, so.
And both of those vehicles are for the police?
Yeah, and then we actually have a Public Works vehicle in there that, a 94 Ford Ranger that we're replacing, and we're looking to replace it with a 1-ton with a dump body on it so that we can actually not have a rig tied up during the winter months with our de-icer equipment, so we can actually still do our work.
Are the previous vehicles auctioned?
We sell them through a surplus. It's a bidding.
Expect.
And you usually see that, you see that in the revenue side, so where it says miscellaneous sales and services.
And these look like it's on a rotation too. I think we talked about that last year, that you have a rotation where a few vehicles come up every year for
So usually there's
replacement.
2 vehicles in the police department that comes up, 1 or 2 in public works throughout the utilities, not just general fund. It just kind of depends. And then we also have a mower, a 36-inch walk-behind mower that needs to be replaced this year. So it's all off of life expectancy of a piece of equipment, hours or miles, or years, so.
Okay. Let's move on to facilities, page 38. 39.
So there are 2.05 FTEs budgeted in facilities.
Thank you. So why the decrease in 6198 out of curiosity? So other professional and technical services.
It probably got moved around in the actual 6260,
Okay,
so from there.
okay.
About the liability insurance, 6201. What was that?
So hopefully, Tom can answer this one. This was a deductible on an insurance claim.
Yeah, it was, and I mentioned when we were going through the HR budget, we're trying to take the safe refund that we get and to put that aside as a buffer against claims that we might have relative to insurance issues. I believe this was a sweeper that backed into a vehicle, if I remember right, or something like that. But when it gets to be a large amount, we charge it out to the different department, and so it got charged here, but in the future, what we're trying to do is use that safe refund to create kind of a bank where we can take these unexpected insurance claims that come in and pay them out of a bucket of money that we have, so they're not hitting the police department or public works or community development or whichever department happened to incur the loss. And so we're trying to reshuffle that a little bit. I don't remember exactly what this claim was, but I can certainly look it up for you, so.
And that's something that you take care of, so you don't have to submit a claim.
Well, we can. We, through our provider, take a look at which is going to be better for us, and we have the choice on each individual claim to either pay it ourselves or to pay the deductible and then have them pay on the claim. Our experience history has been really low, and we still haven't found where typically paying the claim has been to our benefit. But we look at that on each individual claim. We look at it each year, and every 6 months, we have the option to go one way or the other, and we do, so.
Craig, on line item 6312, under repair and maintenance of buildings, there's a fairly significant decrease, which is a bit surprising. Can you tell us why that is?
Yeah, the reason why is because that's where our, actually repair and maintenance of grounds, 63, what'd you say, 60?
6312.
Building.
Yeah,
Buildings.
building.
There is, because a lot of our asset plans that's been cut out of this budget, if you were to put in on the sheet that it's been
So
cut.
the one-time expenditures, that's what I
that's
thought
what
you
it
might
is.
say.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So, okay, I'll save my question for.
And
next.
then, this is always a question I ask when I look at this, 4384, the rent of the buildings and facilities, is that largely Sesame Donuts lease? It's all Sesame Donuts lease.
And so why is it going down?
18480.
It started 23,702, 17,007, 18,
Probably because you had somebody renting an office at Public Works, maybe?
Yes, that's right.
Oh.
Earlier in the
1314.
year, and that they
There was
were-
other leases that
okay.
you don't have.
So
in
other,
Public.
so that lease didn't
Yes,
change, just,
yes.
okay.
Katie, can you help explain the water purchases line through 6310? Was that a new addition for 1617 and we're carrying that on to 1718?
We didn't previously charge, so the water fund didn't previously charge the departments for the water, and so that was changed. And both the school district, the city departments are all now paying the full cost of water.
So we may see that in other of the operations.
You will see it all across in
Yes.
parks and everywhere.
Great, thank you.
You've also had the Arts Center for the past year now, so that number's included.
That changes, yeah.
Had the what?
The Arts Center.
The Arts Center.
Our consumption's included now, where it wasn't included the budget before.
Great. Moving on to parks and maintenance.
9.09 FTE in parks maintenance. And I want to highlight an area where I made a mistake in here, and so that we'll come forward as needing a motion to correct it at the end. If you'll look in line 6310, the water purchases. When we had initially started the budget, we had some additional costs for Langer Park and the city possibly taking it on to be a dog park. When we looked at the total costs of the landscaping and the maintenance and all of that, it was completely cost prohibitive for us to do that. And so I removed all the other costs, and I forgot that there was water cost to irrigate at Langer Park. So that number is actually $12,000 too high. So the 95,899 should be $12,000 less. So the number should only have increased by about 2% to account for the increase in the water rates, not an additional consumption for them.
And is this water that it's only on city property, right? Or is this part of the intergovernmental agreement with the school district?
This is just the city parks, is my understanding. The school district pays their own water bills.
That'd be under revenue.
Oh, right here where it says school district.
Yeah, that'd be under revenue. With the
That
water.
revenue, that 245, isn't for water though.
No, that is our IGAs with the school district.
Oh, for our maintenance and stuff.
Paying half of the maintenance for school district property, and then about $125 or so for the actual infrastructure.
Where in the budget does it show the water charge revenue for the school?
It's in the utility fees, just like all the other customers.
In the water.
In the water fund.
In the water fund?
Yeah,
Utility
we'll
fee.
come back to that.
Got it.
to
Utility
highlight
fee, water
that,
fund.
so.
Okay.
Is the increase in the janitorial budget, is that because of the school district?
No, the increase in the janitorial budget is because you're gonna have a Portland Loo over here, as well as Woodhaven Park, brand new restrooms.
So we're adding
Yeah.
facilities that need cleaning.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to clarify, on the, facilities, liability, that was actually the water damage that was done here at City Hall, when the,
What line is that?
Oh, when the,
It wasn't the sweeper?
yeah, it's the 6201, that's correct.
6313, Craig, in grounds maintenance,
Yeah,
is that the
yeah.
addition of, yeah,
That would be the
Sorry,
assets
it's
that's been removed from the budget that was cut for our asset replacement program.
That's the turf replacement at Snyder that was added in, the 160,000 that's in a one-time expense.
okay.
Oh, I thought you were asking it something different, but, because that's where that line goes, but it is the 160,000.
That's why it went up.
Okay, yeah, perfect, okay.
So just for clarity, the line we're talking about is.
Is 6313,
Goes
and-
from 233 in this year's budget up to 327.
Okay, and so in your professional opinion, the turf, it's time.
So a couple things with the turf. We do GMAX testing, which is a concussion testing on the turf. And we've been doing it, we do it on our sports fields, and we try to do it annually, get a report out of it. It did have a lot of, over the amount that you're supposed to for compaction. If you go to actually try to do any maintenance of an infill on that, the actual threads are too small and it'll just be black. So we have not done anything with it. It is a safety hazard in certain areas, as well as it's the fine, it's the little carpet is like it does when cleats are on it, it squishes down, you can't put anything in it. So, it's about 12 years old.
Yeah.
So,
And
That's
so one of the things, and the reason I bring this up, Joe touched on this at our first meeting, but this is a significant expense, of course. And so I wanted to highlight that and remind folks that your collective staff opinion is that replacing the turf minimizes the city's liability overall.
yes, we've actually had a third party look at it too, so.
Okay. Any other questions on parks and maintenance?
Where do we show in our budget for the fees that we get? Is it just in the, it wouldn't be just the field house, for like all of the ball teams?
So it's in community
Youth
services, it shows in two places, in community services, and then depending on the field and the type of league, there's a small portion that goes into the general construction fund for turf replacement. Those are the two places that that revenue shows up.
So just out of curiosity, Craig or Katie, 4363 recreational facility rental, $7,000. What is that? Is
That's-
that picnic shelters?
That's the shelters at Stella Olson, Pioneer, Murdoch, and Snyder Park.
Okay.
And that varies, it's usually anywhere 6,500, as you can see, to 9,000, actually 11,000 one year.
And we made the decision not to, the new picnic shelter at Woodhaven, not to put it on reservation. It's first come, first served.
But those prices stayed pretty steady for the rental on those over the last few years.
Yeah.
Can you tell me again what line was where the expense for the turf field replacement would come under?
6313, under parks maintenance.
And then the only last question I have, Craig, is one of the goals for 1718 is to complete all the preventative maintenance for all of our HVAC units. Is that something that is done in-house by your team, or is that subbed out?
So the HVAC maintenance, we do certain things in-house that we can do, and then we sub it out, yes.
Okay,
There's somebody come in every 6 months,
okay,
and we do stuff on a quarterly basis. And some things on a daily basis off of a computerized system.
right, okay.
And I do want to point something out, just because you may not notice it, but I do think that you should know. As you know, we've had to make lots of cuts into things, and so holiday lights and flower baskets have been cut. So those are not included in this budget. They have been submitted for the Metro CEP grants, and so we hope to receive those grants in order to continue doing that, but they have been cut from the budget in order to balance it.
And the decision was that both of those are, in our opinion, staff's opinion, community enhancement, beautification type things and are perfect for the Metro grant. Ultimately, the committee will make that decision based on all the applications, but we felt pretty strongly that the committee would probably agree to fund those in that program, and that's why it's not in the budget.
And how much is that?
Holiday lights were $5,000, I think.
Downtown holiday lights is usually about 15,000. And the
Flower baskets are
about 5.
And the flower baskets, Public Works is a little bit behind and rapidly trying to catch up, but the flower baskets weren't going up. And I was a little worried that, I know we cut it for next year's, but that doesn't mean it didn't go this year. And he said, no, we're just about 3 weeks behind. And the day I asked, lo and behold, they were putting them up. So, thank you.
This is the third week.
Believe it or not, people would be very upset if we didn't have flower baskets in Old Town, so. I would be getting calls, Mayor.
I would.
Not on social media yet.
Yet being the operative word in that sentence.
So I have one more question about the turf and how those funds for the turf field replacement get split. Can you tell me what the percentage is and where they're coming from one more time?
I can't tell you the percentage. It
Okay.
has to do with the specific leagues and the use of the fields. We have a portion, and it would take Lance to explain
That's
which
okay.
ones go
Yeah.
where. But there's a small portion when a field is used for a league, I believe, so that the funds are set aside so that we can replace the turf. And that goes into the general construction, and it's a reserved amount. All of the other league fees and all of the use of the field house, for example, those all go into the field house funds, which are in the community services
Okay.
department.
And is the money, the money it costs to replace the turf, would you say?
It's not the same turf, and so this doesn't come into play for that. Those funds.
I have a question on line 6498. If you look through the years on the budgeted and projected, there is probably the most amount of volatility of the other lines, and I don't know if that can get broken out any better.
So I can explain a little bit of that. We've talked about the Metro CEP grants a few times, and the fact that they've kind of bounced around as to where they've been paid for. And so next year, we've started the Fund 17 so that we have that grant just by itself in a fund, and all the ins and all the outs will be in one fund. Well, there were several projects in 16, 17 that were budgeted, that were CEP grants, that are in that line. That line lends itself to items where you know, for example, the total cost of the project, but you don't know exactly how much will be supplies, how much will be professional services. You might have a little bit that's personnel. So you put a lump number in there. It's a holding place of sorts for specific projects. So in 16, 17, we had park signage for $30,000. We had $20,000 from Metro CP. We had $10,000 that was transferred in from city manager budget. We had park recycling phase 2, and then we had Roy Rogers vegetation improvement. So that was all Metro grant funds that got put into that. And that's why I really want to take them out so that we smooth those lines so we don't have these ups and downs.
Which line item was that?
6498.
Katie, if I can go back to that original open you had for adjusting line 6310 down by 12,000. Since we do need to balance, when we go to make a motion to make this change, where will that balance go up by 12K? Do you have does the city have a recommendation?
That balance would either go into fund balance, but I suspect when we get to the fourth meeting and we have all of our one-time things and things that we, there's that whole discussion, that's where that would come into play. The motion can still be made to just reduce the appropriation, and it would go into unappropriated.
Okay.
Until
And
the
so
final
if we were to keep it at the same and reuse it within the fund, which fund are we looking at? We're still in.
It's still in general
right?
fund, and if we were to not make a change to the overall budget, it would be within Public Works.
Okay.
You wouldn't even need a motion if it was within Public Works.
Thank you.
Any other questions on parks maintenance?
I don't think so. Let's move on to the street operations fund.
And I set these up backwards in the, so you now have the operating funds, you have 17 pages, and it's on page 13 of 17.
Okay, go for that.
And your total FTEs in street operations is 4.64.
Go back one minute for a question. In the items that were cut, there was a lot of ceiling crack work. Is that something that can be delayed, in your opinion? Or is that a liability issue that we ought to be concerned about?
Well, I think crack sealing or the sealing is the cheaper way of fixing something besides going in and tearing up parking lots and reconstructing. It's the cheaper version of it. Can it go out a year? Yeah, but it's gonna need to be done sometime in the next few years. And the more you have the cracks in your parking lots, or the more water gets underneath that and into the base, which creates soft spots, which ends up ruining the base of that asphalt, underneath that asphalt, and you have to actually make big repairs or a reconstruct.
So moving forward to street operations, there's a bit of a decrease in revenue.
And I should have pulled that up. I don't have it up on my computer right now. So the state shared revenues, there's some ups, there's some downs in different areas, and this is just based on the latest projections from the state as far as the vehicle taxes go.
So I'm gonna, while we're on this fund, this is a potential coming attraction a year from now. So we talked about last week, there seems to be a desire among citizens at least, that I want to talk to the council about traffic calming. Because of traffic issues and all the congestion on the major roads, folks are cutting through neighborhoods, and we do not have a traffic calming program currently. It's probably a good time to talk to the council about developing such a program like many of our neighbors have. I've always said, let's not develop a program unless we've got some resources to do something. Because you can develop a program
And not maintain.
and tell people, yeah, we've got this great program, but there are no resources to actually implement. And I'm not saying the city should absorb the full cost. A lot of cities have like a shared cost with a neighborhood. So if you have traffic calming in your neighborhood, it's like a 50-50 split. But this revenue source, this vehicle tax revenue source, would be potentially a source that we could allocate X amount every year to go toward traffic calming. I've seen that in other cities, that they take a portion of their vehicle taxes and gas taxes, and they use that for traffic calming. That's a policy decision for the council, but I think we're gonna have that conversation this year, so.
Currently, that vehicle tax is being spent.
Street maintenance.
Street maintenance.
And so I was able to pull up the state shared revenue, but I think when they reset the microphones, they may have reset our projector, so not sure
I
what
can
needs
get
to be
that.
done there. But the per capita disbursement's gone down from 58.47 per capita to 57.61. That's the overall decrease that they're projecting, and that's reflected in those overall amounts, why it decreased.
It's coming back to life.
Are there any other specific questions related to street ops? Okay, moving on. So Katie, can you point us to where we should go?
Okay, so enterprise funds, we'll start with the water fund. And that will be found on page 4 of 17. There we go. And water operations has 6.9 FTE this year.
So your question, where is the revenue from the school district
At all.
at all, is 4371, correct? Utility
It's within the.
fees, it's in that line item. It's not broken out. They're a customer like everybody else.
Also, as when Katie's talking about FTEs in our department, that really shifts a lot from year to year because it's about our workload and we allocate people to work in different areas, so. And then back on the, like when we were talking about the parks, the 9 FTEs, a lot of those are seasonals that we really rely on. And that's why we're behind when Joe talked about 3 weeks, because we can't get seasonals. We've got 2 right now and we should be staffed up to about 6, so stuff gets delayed. But a lot, we really rely on our seasonals and they're in those numbers. So where it shows like 9 people in parks, that's a lot smaller than that. Just during the winter or during the summer months, we have a lot more, so.
A lot of our seasonals, as you can probably guess, are college students, so they're still in school.
That's what I was gonna ask, so you can't get them because they're not here yet?
We can get them, but it's usually June or the end of
Yeah.
May, so.
Are seasonals eligible for PERS?
No, they don't work enough hours in a year to qualify, so.
So what's the regular FTEs that we have? I mean, not regular, but during the winter months? 4, you said, Craig?
Well, because there's a little bit of my time that goes into that too. Katie could probably tell you exactly how many seasonals we have in each section. but-
Scrolling over here. So water is 6.9 total. Of that, 0.56 is seasonals. All the rest are regular. We have quite a bit of admin time actually with all of the utility billing because we do all of our utility billing
Yeah.
in-house. We have
Okay.
several of the utility billing, and then the program analyst who does a lot of work on the financial system itself, the billing system, and then a few people out in the field.
The increase that we have for 4371, which is the revenue, is that from new service or is it mostly from?
There are 2 pieces, and that came from the consultant, and I don't know, Craig, you can give more information if you want, but so the consultant looked at all of our accounts and the population and the estimated growth and a 2% increase on the rates, and all of that applied together is what went into that calculation for the increase in the rates, and that's based on the big fee study that was done by the consultant.
So our adopted, we were at 5.1.
The adopted was much too low
And
this year.
we were just winging it, or, and then the consultant came in, or?
Well, remember last year we had an interim finance director who got thrown in to this, and the estimate she used was, I think, too low. We didn't have the benefit of the consultant's work and everything, so.
That's some of it. And if you go back to 15, 16, we had a very warm spring,
Yep.
very warm fall, so people used irrigation, and our revenue was up. I mean, so you see that, and then when you try to make what your revenue is gonna be the next year, and you have a cooler, you're not gonna bring in as much revenue. So there's some of that that's probably played into that too. Because that's what we have to do with the plant too. We have to try to figure those things out as we go into it.
And does that true up that we always do, does that line item get affected by the true up?
So the line item, the water purchase line item would
It's the
be.
expense line.
Okay.
That's true.
So we
But-
do true up with Wilsonville in August on our costs for water.
There was also the fact that we started with billing the departments and the school district, and so there wasn't the history to go off of for how much we used at the different times. So when you're starting something new, there's always a variance between your projections and the actuals until you can kind of stabilize and see how much is being used.
So how much then, how much have we received as now new income that's stable income that were from those sources that weren't paying before?
I do not know, I do not have
Okay,
the
because we
breakdown.
jumped up almost $500,000. And we're going up.
Well, and our estimate for the school district, if I recall, wasn't it in the $150,000 range? $100 to $150,000 just
Just
from the
the
school district alone.
And then we got our side of it, so it's probably a quarter. Yeah, it's probably a couple hundred, 250,000. When you put the city side in there, as well as the school district side.
And the Y was about 30,000, I remember, so. So that's a good portion of it was the new customers, and then just growth.
So Craig, on 62 6218 franchise fees, those seem to be trending up year over year. Is that something that would be expected? And
It's directly tied to those utility fees. It's a percent of them, a direct percentage. So as we're seeing those utility fees go up fairly dramatically, we're also seeing the franchise fees. Even on the cities and the school district, all those, there's also franchise fees. So it's across the board.
Because it's 5% of revenue. So if revenues are up, we're getting more franchise fees.
And those are just fees that we're charging for the water that go right back into the general fund.
They go to the general fund.
I have a question on line 6102. This is the Water Operations Fund, not a capital outlay fund, right? What are the engineering and architectural costs, and why are they going up this year?
So the engineering costs, usually they're about $20,000 because we contract our engineering services out for water.
Yep.
But we had a couple water main breaks this last year, and we actually have engineering firm working over off of Century right now that's gonna roll into next year.
Got it. So these are charges related to a repair rather than a rebuild. Okay, thank you.
How about on 6214, dues to organizations went from 34 to 66 almost?
Yeah, so a few years, we've been working on the WGG, Willamette Governance Group. So we've been paying our full Willamette, WRWC, Willamette River Water Coalition fees, where in the past we were paying half because that's where those fees were coming from when we pay the facilitator and stuff. So this year it's went to 65 because we're still doing the WRWC fees, but when Tualatin backed out of the participation, we have $25,000 budgeted in this next year's budget for the Willamette Governance Group.
All right.
Question. The meters and installations, what's causing that big increase? Is that new development,
That's related.
commercial development?
Is that up in the revenue you're talking about?
Yes.
Yeah, that is related to meter sales, meter development, the installation of water meters.
That comes through the building department when they do the permits. That piece of it comes from community development.
So that's growth, basically.
All right, moving on.
So if we'll skip over water capital for now, like I said, and move on to sanitary ops. Sanitary is also sewer. I'm not sure why we have two names, but.
And as a reminder, the narrative, Craig's narrative, along with all of the other staff heads, are under budget detail. And right now, we're on page 83 of that section of our book, so that folks can have an idea of overall 17-18 goals. Are there any specific questions here?
So sanitary is 3.08 FTE this year.
That does have utility billing as well as some other stuff in there too.
So Craig, one of the things that jumps out when I was looking at this earlier today, capital outlay 7010, there's $91,000 proposed for infrastructure. What is that?
The 91,000 is for a couple projects to install 3 manholes over on the other side of 99 off of Daffodil. And then our manhole repairs, you'll look at the professional services, it was up in there last year, it was about $40,000 or $50,000 for inside repairs of manholes as well as outside asphalt repairs around manholes before we actually come into areas and slurry.
And so you'll see across these utility funds, you'll see that there's not good consistency between what is coded in 7010 and what's coded up in the 6,000s. And this is partly because we're in the middle with the auditors on figuring out the best way to account for some of these assets. The city doesn't yet have a clear fixed asset policy for infrastructure and which items are classified as maintenance in the financial statements and which items are classified as capital outlay. There are different rules depending on how much of the asset, and does it extend the life, and does it extend the value? There's a lot of things, and we broached it briefly at the last audit, and then we had the RFP out, so we haven't been able to do any consulting work with auditors. The new contract hopefully will be approved next month, and then we'll start back into being able to discuss with the auditors. So some of these, if you wonder and things, you're wondering why things are between two different accounts, it's because we're still fine tuning where they will go. When you adopt the budget, they're adopted into the same overall number. So as far as you guys are concerned, it makes no difference where we code it. It's purely just an accounting, which line should we put it in?
All right.
Craig, was there something besides the 3 manholes at Daffodil?
Yeah, there's about $50,000, 25,000 for inside manhole repairs and 25,000 for pavement repairs. So when you drive down a road and you see a manhole go up in the subdivision,
Yeah.
that's what we're going to repair those before we see it on the road. So a lot of it ties to our street program.
Line 6798, the 507,000. And years previous, there was nothing.
Did you move into capital?
Oh,
I think you
I'm
might have
sorry.
moved into capital.
I'm sorry. I did.
Okay. Let's move in.
I
to-
don't have my glasses on. It's getting small.
So let's move on to storm ops. And that begins on page 10. One of the things that actually gave me pause on this was in your goals, one of your goals is to assure that all water quality facilities are operational. Is there any implication that they're not currently operational, or we're just maintaining their
We're
operation?
maintaining and a lot of
Okay.
water quality facilities need to actually be rehabilitated.
Okay,
So there is obstruction in some of them out there that was built in the 90s, early 2000s, and we're trying to go through and get them cleaned up, but you can only do so many of them a year.
at a time, yeah.
And then we have certain agreements out there with homeowners associations that's supposed to maintain certain ones. So when they don't comply, then we have to deal with sometimes, as well as our private water quality facilities with business owners.
Okay, and then the homeowners, of course, would be billed back, and the city would be reimbursed. Yes?
We're responsible for the water to go from point A to point B. They're responsible in some of the agreements to maintain the vegetation, which we are responsible for the A to B, so it's our facility to maintain besides the actual vegetation. Yes, if it's vegetation related, they would be billed back, or most of them actually have a landscaper do it.
Okay.
Something what they've been doing where they go into kind of a drainage area and
Yeah.
take out all the trees and all
Yep.
that.
And when we get to the one-year CIP, there are some rehab projects on that list that you may have a question about, so.
6107, the street sweeper, is that due to the purchase of the street sweeper and us doing it now in the city rather than contracting it?
Yeah, we keep a small amount of money, because if we break down and we have to hire somebody for a month, but we actually are doing the work now, so you would see that in the salaries above that. One time, we were paying about $120,000 a year for street sweeping services.
And Storm Ops has 5.39 FTE. You'll notice an increase in this. This relates back to what Craig was saying about sort of reallocating people. And so some of the people that have previously been in parks all year round, now we have the ability to move, I want to say 3 months out of the year, is that right? Over to Storm to make sure that we can keep up with the work in Storm. So that's where that increase is that you see in the personnel services.
I think also, a few years ago, when we talked about going with AMI meter readers, has cut our time way back. So that person that we had working in that is actually sweeping streets now. So we didn't hire anybody for that. We just allocated time differently.
So I know that I still see the little vehicle driving around town. There's still some of that meter reading that's going on, just not as some
Not a-
significant?
Yeah, not a lot of meter reading. We do a lot of our customer service still out of that
Okay.
vehicle.
6324, the refuge service, was that due to the storms and the snow last year, breaking the,
Yeah, so what you'll see there is in each one of the categories, each one of the funds, there's a little bit for garbage service we pay for our garbage. And you'll see over the years, we've moved our leaf program, our leaf drops, Pride hauls that. We've moved that out of materials and supplies as well as our sweeping debris, because that's more of materials and supplies that we're getting rid of. That's just strictly our garbage.
why is it decreased so much in the proposed budget?
Because we moved it to actually the 6498. It was, our LEAF program was budgeted out of there also, so that's not there anymore in the garbage fund, because it's really not garbage.
All right, unless there are any other questions, I would like to just take 1 second to say thank you to Public Works for all of your hard work this past winter. You really saved the city. And we all, I feel very confidently to speak on behalf of this entire committee that we very much appreciate being able to get on and off the roads. So thank you and all of your staff for your hard work.
I will pass that on.
Yeah.
Just so everybody knows, that little event was about a $50,000 event out of the street budget. So that there's no recovery on, that's gonna come back. But one more thing in this budget, you'll see the 687,000 in 7010. That's infrastructure projects that relates back to our street projects for this next year, as well as rehabilitating a couple of those ponds that we talked about earlier. That's where we fund that from, that line item.
Well, thank you very much.
Yep, thank you.
I'd like to add to that traveling baseball team. I'm seeing a lot of school fields, and on Monday I walked through knee-high grass to get to one of the fields at one of the schools. So I'm very thankful of our IGA with our school district and the work that you guys do out there.
Thank you. Yes, some of them are a mess out there.
All right, well, thank you for your time this evening.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, so it's just about 5 to 7. Let's take a short break and reconvene about 7:05. It is now 7:05.
Not that great.
Yeah.
Jean got mad, not Mirta.
Okay. We were just trying to make you.
So now we will go into the review of capital funds and one-year capital improvement plan.
So if you'll refer to your packets on this one, in your packet, there will be a one-year capital improvement project listing. And this is really the foundation of everything that's in all of the capital funds. What I'd like for us to do is to go through these and look at the projects. If you have questions on the projects, if you want to know where they are, what's being done, Julia and Craig are both here. And these do tie to the capital budgets. If you're trying to tie them dollar for dollar, they will not tie, I will tell you right now. This has to do with personnel allocations. There's the way things are calculated in the personnel model versus the way they're calculated in the CIP model. They are substantially the same. I've tied them out, cross-tied them, but if you have any specific questions, you can ask. But if you try to go line by line, it's going to be extremely confusing. So I strongly recommend that we go through these. We can discuss what the funding sources are for them if you'd like, which funds you'll find the activity in, and then if we have any specific questions at the end, we can go through those.
And Katie, would this be a good time to talk about this document?
Sure.
Okay. So last year, you may recall that we handed out a CIP document to everybody. This document has been updated to reflect the one-year CIP list, and we changed it out to reflect the projects in this updated sanitary and storm master plan. But it's substantively the same in terms of format and look and that kind of stuff. And it's quite expensive to make the copies that we made last year. So we made a few copies that we can pass around and let you guys look at. We have a link on the website, and we'd be happy if you really want a copy that we'll make you a copy. But rather than making a bunch of copies. If you aren't interested, we did not do that, so.
And the most important thing is this list, this is what we're doing
Right.
next fiscal year, and this is what you're ultimately approving next year's budget to do these projects. You're not approving projects 3 years from now, or 5 years from now, or 10 years from now, so. And these are tangible projects that as you drive around town over the next 12 months, you will see these. So if there's, like I said to my staff this morning, Old Town mid-block sewer point repair, okay, where in the heck in Old Town is that? So you may have questions about where these projects are taking place, because the names of the projects don't necessarily equate to an exact location.
So if I'm understanding this table correctly, the third column is what, the amount that we'll be spending in that year, and then some of these projects have either begun and we're still spending money on them,
Correct.
or they're beginning and then we will continue to spend money.
Correct.
That's correct.
Looks like there are some, I guess, that start and stop in the same year, or will be completed.
Correct.
Okay. Thanks.
My first question is on the Kruger-Elwert Road. What's still remaining for the project this year?
There's actually a lot that's remaining on the project. It's actually the county is doing the project, and they're providing the large majority of the funding. The 1.35 million is essentially what we have spent in the past on purchase of the property, for that will allow for that roundabout, which we spent several years ago. And then the 37,080 is essentially staff time for coordination with the county to make sure that we're knowing what they're gonna do, they're knowing what we need them to do, and that kind of stuff.
I see. And is that going to go along with the Tualatin Sherwood Road widening, the coordination with the
Different
county?
projects, but same concept.
Same concept,
Yeah.
okay. Thank you.
Is that a roundabout? at
For the
that
Kruger
point?
Elwert,
Yeah.
yes.
And that original roundabout design may need to be
It will need
upsized
to change, it will.
because of the high school, proposed new high school that is going
Okay.
adjacent to that project, so.
More like the one at, on Langer Parkway?
Potentially, yeah, I believe it's gonna be upsized.
What is it
Yeah,
called?
Long.
Two lane.
Okay.
What are the water life, safety, and seismic upgrades?
So they're actually in the plant for seismic upgrades, because the plant was built in 2000. It's more coming in and finding out what we have to do and moving forward. So there's just this big master plan done of the treatment plant, and it's a small little project out of that, the big, it's just a small, tiny project compared to the bigger seismic upgrade that's gotta happen there in the river.
Is that a,
Treatment plant you're talking about in Wilsonville?
Yes.
And this is our responsibility?
So it's a partnership with Wilsonville. They'll be paying a percentage of that. Ours is probably about 33%, I believe, on that. Yes, 33.33% of the total project.
is that a spelling error? Should that be line? Water life?
Life safety and
Life safety, they're calling, that's what we call it in the actual plan.
And then question on Old Town mid-block sewer point repair. You have it for both years, but the total cost is only,
That was an error.
Okay.
It should only be in the current fiscal year,
okay.
We caught that today,
or the
Counselor.
proposed fiscal year, yeah.
So just humor me, so can you show where the Old Town, where this project is?
Yeah, this is actually part of a larger project. It's actually in the CIP for this current year, which we did not get to. And then when we did the master plan upgrades, it sort of became part of a larger project. But it's, you can see up there, it's kind of actually the lowest one on, I believe that's the one on Railroad Street, the lowest red line. For that's the one that we're looking at doing next year specifically.
Oh, right, on the other side of the vacant lot, that will soon be a parking lot.
Yes, I believe so.
And then I have a question on the skate park design and construction. has $0 expended for previous years. Aren't we putting money into that we've?
So we have $12,000 in the budget. We are just at 90% on the drawings right now. I just received them today.
Oh, wow.
So we have not received a bill yet for that, but there is $12,000 in the budget.
And all we're doing in next year's proposed budget is getting it through land use and preparing the grant application in the spring to the state, which we hopefully will be successful. And if we are successful, it will be in next year's budget for construction. So that's that 561 in future fiscal years, that's construction of it.
So between the application in March, you said?
Springtime
Or
usually.
spring? And we don't start construction until after July 1st? Okay.
2 more summers.
But we'll start, once we get through the design, we'll take it through land use, and that will start in the fall probably, I would say, workload wise. We probably want to have that done before we apply for the grant,
Yeah.
so we show we're in good faith.
One of the criteria for a successful grant is, do you have land use approval? So we want to check that box and say, yes, we have land use approval.
And we discussed whether to put all of it in and just assume that we were getting a grant, and decided that that's really a bad assumption to do, to put revenues in there that we don't know yet. So this would require a supplemental budget where we would put both the grant revenues and then corresponding expenses that would be paid for from the grant, should we receive it. So we would anticipate a supplemental budget at the time when a grant was received.
But for now, the total cost to be spent is
This is what we're estimating our match will be.
580? Okay.
Correct. That's our match, not the total cost of the
Oh,
grant.
okay. All right.
Really quickly, because it's the largest amount on here, the water treatment capacity, 3.3 MGD, and I'm gonna ask what MGD stands for.
Million gallons a day.
Thank you. It's a buy-in, but is there an infrastructure that's purchased along with that?
There's parts of infrastructure, the intake. So really what this is through the Willamette Governance Group, TVWD's offered this, they want you to buy in now, or you're gonna pay more money down the road, because all the people were at the table buying that. So we're buying the next 3.3 million this year is what that's in there for. And then there's another part of the project for capacity increase that's going to come at a later time. But really, that's getting Sherwood to the 9.7 million gallons a day that our water master plan calls for any future growth or whatever comes along our way that we need to supply water. But mainly that's buying into the intake, some pumping, and some other stuff at the plant.
The other point, just because it gets discussed a lot in town, the second dog park. So that says dog park design, that's really actually design and construction.
Oh, good, I was gonna ask.
It's a
Wow,
really,
that's
really
a-
fancy dog.
Gold-plated dog park.
Okay.
Because if this does get approved through the budget process, we still would like to expedite that and get it done before the winter. Because the plan is to add a second dog park that is flat with chips, that will be open year-round, and will not get all the wonderful love from our dog lovers when Snyder Park is closed because of rainy conditions.
We just won't have Christmas then, unless the CEP.
Okay. Any
Like explain that,
other,
is that more important than some of the things?
any
that-
other comments about the capital improvement plan? No, great, thank you. So now we will again open for public comment. Jean, has anyone submitted? Okay, I'm gonna just ask if anyone here would like to say anything, and no one does. We have the option as a committee to approve the budget as is this evening. Based on there not being a motion, I believe that we will hold off until we have further discussion next week. So I will suggest that we move to have the URA budget discussed.
So Madam Chair, we do have to adjourn the previous meeting and open a new meeting and call the roll and do all of that over again. They're
Okay, my
separate meetings.
apologies. So I will adjourn this budget committee meeting for the evening. And now I will open the URA budget meeting. Today is still May 25th. It is now 7:20. And Katie, would you kindly take roll?
Chair Meyer,
Yes, I am.
Vice Chair Paul Mayer,
Here.
Andy McConnell,
Here?
Susan Claus, Andy Jensen. Amy Kutsky did not come this evening. Kurt Studer.
Here.
Christina Clark. Here. Jennifer Harris. Here. Kim Young. Here. Sean Garland.
Here.
Dan King is absent. Jennifer Kuiper.
Here.
Sally Robinson.
Here. Thank you. So Tom, if you would be so kind as to review highlights of your budget.
Sure, yeah, so I'll walk through kind of just a little bit of the URA and remind you where we're at, and then we can kind of go through the line item detail as we have in the past. And I'll kind of, since we're doing the URA, I'll probably just go ahead and talk about some of the different line items, and you can either stop me or ask additional questions. But I think as everyone knows, the Urban Renewal Agency is kind of winding down operations in a lot of areas. And so if you take a look at the documents you have, page 3 of the Urban Renewal plan is the operations, and page 4 is the capital. We actually merged the two funds a few years ago just because the number of capital projects that we were doing weren't that large, and we were able to track them more easily inside the operations budget. And so you'll kind of see the capital budget on page 4 is only about through 2014-15, and then it gets merged into the operations budget from there forward. Just kind of real quickly, I think the Urban Renewal Agency is getting close to the maximum indebtedness that we're allowed to actually spend. And so we're kind of keeping a close eye on that and doing projects and making sure that we're trying to manage those and keep them within budgets so that we don't accidentally trip over that number, which would be something we definitely don't want to do. And so I think largely we are really focused on property sales and getting rid of the assets that the Urban Renewal Agency owns. We've had a number of meetings with the URA board to kind of talk about what they would like to prioritize and what they would like to see happen with those properties, and we're starting to do that. That requires some resources for marketing those, as well as deciding whether or not we're going to use brokers and other things. And then the capital projects. And then this next year's budget, we really are looking at doing two projects. One is to construct the parking lot on First Street. We bought property there a few years ago, and we want to finish that parking lot. And then to design and construct a sanitary sewer line that would serve the Sherwood Boulevard property. The URA is trying to divest itself of that property. It can't currently be served by sewer out to Sherwood Boulevard, and that sanitary sewer line in the senior center and a couple of other upstream properties are problematic because they're so shallow. One property can't be served. So we're going to build a public sanitary sewer line up, kind of down from the parking lot down there at Stella Olson up to serve those entire properties going back that way. So really those are the two large capital projects. One thing that I want to make note of is I did not put any monies in the budget this year for the facade grant program. We haven't had a whole lot of demand for that in the past years, and quite frankly, we just don't have a whole lot of funds left. We finally did get one application for about $1,500, $1,600 just a few weeks ago, but that's really the only grant application we've had in the last year and a half or so. It's actually from Mason, and it's going to be on the council's, or the URA board's June 6th meeting.
Okay, good.
Yeah. So they're replacing their awning that is pretty bad shape, so.
So that's likely the last one.
Likely the last one, unless, you know, depending on how these construction projects all work out, there might be a little money left where we could do the facade grant program the following year, or whatever other priorities council may have, or the URI board may have. But I think we kind of want to just be a little conservative, and we also can take that money and pay back debt. So, so, you know, it doesn't, just because we have maybe a little bit more ability to spend doesn't mean we need to spend it, so. So just kind of running through, I'm turning to the detail, page 1 of 2. Current property taxes, you can see, is going up a little bit, been a little flat. We had one year where we didn't allocate the full amount of the tax increment financing that we could have, so that was the 15-16 where you see the number drop down significantly. And we, of course, jumped that back up last year, and then are collecting as much as we can again for this year.
I'm going to stop you right there just for a second, Tom. Just so that you know, the amount that is in here as the budget for the property taxes is not the same as the amount that is levied. So when we get to the point of making a motion for the URA budget, that motion has to include the amount of the levy. The amount of the levy is 5% more, and this has to do with the amount of taxes that we do not collect. So when you hear a motion and the amount doesn't match what you just saw here, the reason is because the levy itself is about 3.9 million, whereas we only anticipate collecting 3.7, and it has to do with uncollectible or late payment accounts.
Yeah, and that's important that you actually do put that number in. That's one of the requirements that we have learned from the county that they want to see in the resolution to move forward when we actually submit our documents to the county later on in the year. So it also serves as a double check so you don't end up with the same situation you did back in 15, 16. Just moving down the list, you can see we have some legal expenses in line 6104. Those are primarily because we moved all the legal expenses under the city. The URA has an IGA with the city to provide legal services, but we have a situation where we're selling a piece of property and the trail's going through that property, so the URA's needed to hire some outside legal services. So we have identified some monies not only that we didn't budget for this year, but also for next year related to that. We had some land use application and capital project fees this year, which weren't budgeted. Those will actually, we may move down into the capital line. That was relative to the parking lot. As we went through the land use processor, we ended up having to do some code changes and a number of different applications in order to make sure that we were ready to move forward on that project. The other professional technical services is this year was for the parking lot, was also for realtor fees that we had relative to transactions. And then each year we're required to do an additional financial report, which the city isn't required to do for the Urban Renewal Agency. And the $10,000 I'm in line 6198, by the way. We also are gonna be doing a partition to partition the piece of property in front of the Art Center off from the other property. So we're gonna need some professional technical services for putting together that application. Printing and advertising, line 6208, that jumped up this year, and the reason is because we hadn't budgeted for the CAFR, which is the same thing that the city does. It's a consolidated annual financial report.
Very good.
Oh, wow, good. And budget.
It's from an engineer.
Budget, it took me 6 years. But basically, that is a different document that finance people use to have consistency across the state and in reporting. And Katie could have given me a much better explanation of that. Other than that, dues to organizations, just notes, we are part of Greater Portland, Inc., which is an organization that does economic development. That's a part of that. And then we're also part of Oregon Economic Development Association, and a portion of that comes from the URA as well. So if you jump down to 6604, like I said, we didn't budget anything for the facade grants. Special projects is just there in case we need it. And then finally, capital infrastructure, line 7010. The two projects there are the First Street parking lot and the sanitary sewer line on Sherwood Boulevard.
And that 340,000 includes both projects?
That does, that's correct.
So if the URA board approves that one grant that we do have, would that be in this current year?
If the URA approves the facade grant, it would be
Yeah.
in this year, yes.
Okay.
And I have told them that they have to spend the money before July 1st, and they are fine with that, so.
And so the sale of the property isn't in here because obviously it hasn't happened yet, and we can't count on that, but there would be then a supplemental?
Well, maybe, because it's income, so we wouldn't necessarily need to do a supplemental budget only on revenue, would we need to do that? But certainly we'd want to account for that. I have not included property sales, just because they're speculative and timing is questionable, so.
We're looking at the URA cash flow and looking at the debt and payments and the timing of when we can close the URA and the sale of property plays into that. So right now, we don't want to budget to spend any of it until we get a good idea of where we're going, when we can close the debt, which bonds are callable, which are not callable, what would the penalty be for prepayment on certain months. So we're about halfway through that process. We need to get through this and a little bit into next year. So for next year's budget, we hope to have a little bit more long-term plan, but it's still a little bit early. It's still a little far on the horizon, but sale of property will come into play for that, for the debt payments.
How many properties do we have left in the URA?
I couldn't tell you exactly, I think there's around 7. We still own a fair number of properties, 6 or 7. And we're working on trying to put a couple of those, up on the market here very soon, or at least one, which is, it could be one or another. And then looking down the road as if we can get some interest in those properties to potentially thinking about others. So, and the one we're particularly going to be putting up is the pad in front of the Center for the Arts. But the property that's kind of across from the plaza from that is about the same size of building. And so we'll probably kind of market both of those at the same time to see which one someone would be more interested in. One is more, has a better location visibility being in front of the Center for the Arts, but has a shared parking lot. The other would be, they'd have their own parking lot. And so it would really depend on who is interested to which they would like, and we'll sell either one or both, so.
And it's safe to say most of those, if not all, are in the Old Town area, except for maybe the old schoolhouse. Is that a URA?
Yeah, so the Sherwood owns the old schoolhouse property, the Robin Hood property, the pad in front of the Center for the Arts, the piece across the plaza. We own all this property from the plaza all the way down to the Public Works yard. The URA owns some other properties like the parking lot, which obviously is going to get developed for public use. And then
Behind the senior center, which we have.
right, so the Sherwood Boulevard project property, which we currently have a purchase and sale agreement on, and then the old schoolhouse property is essentially what the URA continues to have on their balance sheet.
Did you just say that we had a purchase agreement on the property?
On Sherwood Boulevard, yes, we do.
And it's just subject to the sewer or getting that?
That's right. Mhm.
So generally speaking, other than a couple of the highlighted points, this is a very status quo budget from our current fiscal year.
That's correct, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And we'll still do, of course, business support in Old Town and as much economic development as we can with the different businesses down here. That's a large part of what I do out of the operations portion of the budget, so.
Okay.
How much of your time is spent for URA?
About 40%, so, yeah.
About
It's actually 50, sorry. 40% in the city manager, 50% in the URA. So, and I spend a fair amount of time, just because it's just me, so.
The change in the, if you look at personnel costs, there has been a decrease in personnel. that was completely attributed to engineering. So some projects require more engineering work for in-house, for design and things like that, depending on the stage of that we're at and how much is done by outside contractors versus inside. So that decrease has to do with engineering time and projects as opposed to administrative time.
So what do we have, like a .5?
We're at 0.68, hang on, let me look, 0.68, yes. And we were at 0.84 for the current fiscal year, and that difference is engineering.
That it? Any questions? So I move to approve the proposed 2017-18 Sherwood Urban Renewal District budget.
Paul,
Oh, what?
before your motion, I need to open the meeting for public comment.
Oh, all right.
At this point, Jean, has anyone submitted for public comment? Okay, so I don't see that anyone is here to submit for public comment, so would you like to continue with your
Okay.
motion? Could you
Once
start from
again-
the beginning, please?
Yes. I move to approve the proposed 2017-18 Sherwood Urban Renewal District budget and to approve the taxes for the 2017-18 fiscal year of $3,942 for operating purposes.
A second.
I now open the floor for any discussion. Okay, I will now take a vote. All in favor? Not in flavor. All in favor, please say aye and also raise your hand. Aye.
Aye.
And if you could just keep your hands up so we can get a count, please.
It's unanimous.
And we're good. And motion passes, and thank you very much. Now, at the recommendation of our city manager, I would like to suggest that we adjourn for this evening. And as we plan to move into deliberations over the fiscal year 17-18 budget, we can come in next Thursday fresh and ready to go.
A second.
Before we adjourn.
Yes.
I'd like to make sure that anyone on the committee has an opportunity to ask the city staff to go, if there's any questions now, to provide additional details. Because once we get to the fourth meeting, I don't want to have a fifth meeting. I don't want to have to ask the
And-
city staff to go get more data.
And we can't have a fifth meeting, actually, legally.
The deadline for us to get the notice in the paper with the approved budget is Friday morning,
Yeah.
the Friday morning after the next meeting, which
So-
means that
Now would be a good time, I think, for, people on the committee to ask the city questions, so that if there's information to provide for discussion next week, we have it.
And to that end, may I ask a question? Joe, with questions, if folks are not prepared on the committee this evening with specific questions, can we submit questions to you within the next couple of days and look to you for a response in advance of our meeting next Thursday?
Yeah, I think if you submit a question, just like you're asking and want to hear it, everyone needs to hear the answer. So if you submit a question, it should be in writing, and what we will do is actually share the answer to the entire budget committee.
Okay, so to further clarify, if I have a question very specifically and would like to email you, I will not email the entire committee. I will email you and Katie, and the pair of you will respond to me or anyone else.
Correct, because what
Okay.
we don't want to encourage, if you did it to everybody, someone could chime in, and then you're doing an online meeting and all that kind of stuff. So
I just
send your
wanted to make sure we
questions
were all on the same page.
to Katie or I. We'll do the work, and then we will send the original question and the answer out to everybody.
So understanding that Monday is a holiday, do you guys have a deadline on when you'd like to have answers by? Because you obviously need some time to
well,
prepare
we'll be
your
meeting
answers.
next Thursday at 6, so if we could have questions by 5, preferably before then, but that's kind of how we roll, so.
So you're allowing right up to basically
It's better than having you sitting here and asking it without any
Correct.
notice, so.
Earlier
trying
the
to be
better.
accommodating to you
Earlier
and your
is better,
time, so.
but-
Okay.
So are there any pressing questions at the moment.
If there are pressing questions, we should reopen the meeting because we're currently in the URA meeting and not in the city's meeting. We can do that. I'm just saying
Okay.
if there aren't any, we're okay.
Okay. So, as a committee, is anyone interested in having me open discussion in regard to the fiscal year 17-18 budget? Okay, so for this evening, we will adjourn, and I wish you all a wonderful evening, and we'll see you next Thursday. Thank you.